native plants are the basis of an ecosystem, but we're talking about, I don't say I'm trying to save native plants, I say I'm trying to save biological communities. I want the whole community, all the plants and animals. The animals need native plants because they co-evolved with it. And if and when all the native plants disappear, which they are in large parts of California, you have nothing but non-natives, and the wildlife for the most part cannot use those. And so you really diminish the landscape and people's experience. We all like to have variety around us, variety of plants and animals and everything. Variety is the spice of life. Anyway, this is very, very diverse here. I don't know how many native plants you got, but it's, at least a couple of hundred different kinds. And that's not even the beginning of it. And then, of course, for every plant you have, the rule of thumb is you got at least 10 species of, say, insects. And, of course, then there's things that live off those insects, like birds and, whatever. And they pass all this energy on up the food chain. It's a very, very complicated thing, and far more complicated than people realize just looking at things. And so it's consequently fairly stable. If you just have just a few species of plants and not very many species of animals, it's subject to rapid change. It's very unstable and, pretty uninteresting too. In the first place, it's just a dramatic setting. You got this mountain, Montara Mountain, this is really the end of Montara Mountain. It just dives into the ocean here at Pedro Point. And it's just a dramatic setting, you got you got a lot of topography, and just the setting is very dramatic. And in addition, you got this fearsome weather coming off the ocean, all this wind, moist-laden winds, and sucked in by fog in the summertime, and it keeps this sort of semi-watered, so that even in August, we're almost in September here, you still got a lot of stuff going on. You got a lot of greenery, you got even wildflowers, paintbrush and pearly everlasting, and just a whole lot of things. I'm active with the California Native Plant Society Yerba Buena chapter, which is San Francisco and northern San Mateo County, and I got my hands full with just that. So, we have a website, www.cnps.org, and you can go to the chapters. We're the Yerba Buena chapter, and you can run us down there. That's really, really hard to say. It won't be good. The land could continue to deteriorate if we didn't take steps to save it. Every year, it's wonderful what is happening here. The coordinator, Lynn Adams, is financed by the Coastal Conservancy. They're doing wonderful work. And if it weren't for that, even with that, what we're doing is inadequate. We need a lot more resources than we have. No one's fault. It's just that that's the state of our society right now. Our values are really pretty mixed up, topsy-turvy. And at some point, if we're going to save things that people are going to want to continue to inhabit this area, we're going to need a lot more resources. And I get sometimes very depressed because, with the current economy, for example, the Iraq War and all that nonsense, all the funding that was beginning to happen all of a sudden collapsed. And now we have very, very little. It was a very depressing thing. But, I see people like this and individuals, communities coming out and helping. They donate their labor and have a good time, by the way. That is pretty exciting to me, and I hang my hopes on it. I don't know if it'll ever go far enough. Anyway, we're going to need a lot more than volunteers.
Hi, this is Margarita Cardenas, your host on Urban Traditions, and you just saw Jake Sigg introduce our subject of the day. Natives or non-natives, that is the question. there's often disdain about propagating native plants, but as you heard from Jake, it's very much needed in our ecosystem. We're going to learn why, and and also about two organizations that are most important and that are championing this fight, and that is the Coastal Conservancy and the Pacifica Land Trust. We have today with us two guests, Mike Vassie, who is a past president of the Pacifica Land Trust and also a member of the board right now. And he's also a lecturer at San Francisco State University. And Lynn Adams, president of the Beach Coalition. Welcome both. How are you today?
Great, thanks.
Wonderful, thank you.
Well, good to see you again, Lynn. I'm going to start with you, Lynn. How did you get involved? Well, you're a member of, or actually the president of the Beach Coalition. And so what is your capacity with, is it the Pacifica Land Trust? Or?
I work for the Pacifica Land Trust as the stewardship coordinator for the Pedro Point headlands. And it was a position that opened up, and I was very interested because I understand the connection between volunteerism and learning about the native species and being able to take it back to our homes. And I think education is a key to really changing the world.
Yes, really. Well, has it been hard to get volunteers up? That day we were there was a lot of people helping to pull out those weeds and everything. So is it always like that? You have a massive...
We've had a wonderful turnout of volunteers and people that come back month after month after month, with a few smatterings of new people that are learning about it every month. And people come back when they can. And it doesn't work for everybody every month, but let me tell you, we have probably 4, 5, 6 people that come back pretty much every month, if not more. And we've been able to filter in new people and bring them in and teach them and have them go back out knowing a little bit more about the native habitat and about Pedro Point.
Exactly, great. Well, Mike, hi Mike.
Hi.
I'd like for you to tell us a little bit more about what was the impetus for Pacifica Land Trust to be created?
Sure. Well, the Pacifica Land Trust was created back in the early 1990s, and it was really an outgrowth of the, we had an Open Space Task Force report, and the Open Space Task Force report identified a number of properties in Pacifica that really had outstanding value for the community as open space, essentially. And one of the suggestions in that report was to form an open space committee and to look at ways of trying to acquire these open space lands in a fair way that would be provide private owners with adequate compensation and so on. And I was on that original open space committee, and I was on a subcommittee with Julie Lancel, and we began to look into what could be the best way of accomplishing that. And we began to discover that there were many land trusts out there, and land trusts are private nonprofit organizations, so they can operate with confidentiality. They can negotiate with private property owners and work with agencies to channel funding into these areas to acquire these lands. So that's precisely what happened with, we were able to interview people, we got a board together, and the the Pacifica Land Trust was established. And then the first project, literally, for the Land Trust was an opportunity to acquire Pedro Point Headland, which has sometimes been referred to as the Diamond Head of Pacifica. It's a fantastic property, roughly 300 acres. You saw some visuals of the setting. There's Pedro Point Rock right off that, which is a fantastic marine area. And it's just an outstanding open space area. And we were able to help landowners who were really in a pickle because of the financial crash at the time. This was in the early 1990s, and get funding from Caltrans to acquire that property as open space. So that became open space, and later the Coastal Conservancy picked up the other half of the property. So now it's basically jointly owned by City of Pacifica and the Coastal Conservancy, and the Pedro Point, or the Pacifica Land Trust, I should say, has been the responsible for the management of the property ever since. And maybe a quick, just to follow up on that. So in the land had been leased to the Pacifica Motorcycle Association from 1970 through the early 1990s for $1 a year. And there was a lot of course, motorcycle activity up there, so there were a lot of different trails. It's still a real network of different kinds of trails that are starting to recover now. We didn't really realize in the beginning what would happen. Sometimes you think, well, we're just going to protect the land and that'll be sufficient. Well, once we protected the land, there was nobody up there to maintain it, and we began to see a tremendous erosion on those trails. And we got gullying, and it became a real nightmare essentially for erosion. So we realized that we really need to pay attention to the site, and we were able to get some funding from Coastal Conservancy to repair some of the damage. And a lot of these trails are disturbances, so they create opportunities for invasive species like pampas grass and French broom and other kinds of non-native invasive species to come in. And it worked fine for about a year. But then, we kept on trying to move the property into a management agency such as the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, and to this day it hasn't been moved into that agency. And we finally realized that what was really needed was ongoing attention to that land in the form of stewardship. And so we got an opportunity to apply for funds through the Coastal Conservancy again, and got a grant to start a stewardship program. We made part of that grant was outreach with the Pedro Point Community Association, so we wanted to get them involved. They've been helpful in donating the firehouse as a place for our materials. We got funding to hire Lynn, and we then got, like literally once a month we meet to get people up there, and that has transformed the situation. Mm-hmm. It's gotten to the point now after almost 3 years where we've really addressed a lot of the invasive species issues, not to say that we've solved it. We're starting to work on erosion issues. We've had some big slides, we've revegetated the slides. And this gets to this question of invasive versus, or non-native versus native plants. I mean, the idea for a place, it's place-based. So in this case, we're talking about Pedro Point Headland. We have native prairie, native shrubland, we have forest that's been introduced and is spreading over the headland. So we're trying to constrain the forest, protect the grassland, protect the shrubland, and it's only really through ongoing activities of the stewardship group that we've really been successful. And not only are you helping the land and helping maintain the diversity that Jake was talking about, but we're also building community. We're also building engagement with people, and anyway, it's been a fantastic experience. I'm really, I feel privileged to have been a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the scenery up there is gorgeous. And I can't imagine, how did it look because you said there was erosion. And when was the first erosion that, you needed to get volunteers out there?
By the mid to late 1990s, we had a gully that was like 4 feet wide and 4 feet deep going down our main arroyo, and we had serious erosion up there. And so that was the first thing we had to spend literally thousands of dollars to deal with that erosion. And we did get that addressed to some degree, but again, without efforts, without people creating water bars, which is a way of channeling water off from the runoff, dealing with slides, revegetating with natives and things like that. I mean, it degrades and deteriorates over time. So it's really we have. What we're learning, and this is something I teach about, I'm a conservation biologist, what we're learning in biology and conservation biology these days is that you can't just put a fence around these areas and expect them to maintain their value, their natural value. They're too small, they're they're part of a bigger system. And the best way to is to manage these sites, to put some human energy into it that helps to, and very much in the tradition of the Native Americans who were here before. So we're really just replacing what is a missing value at this point in time and building community again. That's the most exciting thing about it to me, is that it's this wonderful mix of sustaining diversity and at the same time building community.
Yes. So Lynn, how long have you been going up there and getting volunteers now?
I've been going up there for 3 years. We started the project in, I think, August of 2009. And I've been involving people as much as possible. Took me a little while to learn about the site. The Pedro Point Headlands is a mix of a lot of trails. We've tried to reduce the amount of trails because they went off into nilly-willy and nowhere's land. People get lost, including me, when I first went up there. So, we've been going back and trying to clarify, okay, and we block off places that really are steep erosion areas. Instead of going that way, let's go this way. It's a little more gentle on the land and it's a little easier on our heart.
Right.
And I'd like to say one thing about the work that we've done. It's been a remarkable thing for me to see the transformation when we take out the pampas grass or we take out the French broom and we start seeing the Indian paintbrush and we start seeing the little irises, and all these native plants seem to pop up in the areas that were overcome by non-natives. And it's been really amazing because you get so much more diversity.
Yes.
A big pampas grass can cover a 6-foot area easy.
Wow.
And anything around there is pampas grass, and then it can spread so quickly. I mean, you have 1 million or more seeds in one pampas grass plant.
Well, I learned so much. It was scenic and beautiful and very educational of the California history here, because you're a lecturer and I was just, you were telling us about the railroad and that it ended there, and then from there was a stagecoach that went to Santa Cruz and
it's got Pedro Point itself, again, it's got such an incredibly rich history. It has the Native American history. The valley has the history from the Mexican American period, but the headland itself really is rich in the old Ocean Shore Railroad and period during the Prohibition when Shelter Cove was a major staging area for moonshine, and it's just been it's just an amazing spot, really. It's got so much history to it.
Really,
Yeah.
I can see why it needs to be preserved, or and bring it back.
Yeah.
But how now, Lynn? How do you get all these seedlings up there? Because not everything can be dug up, and especially like those monkey flowers, they're just booming up there.
Aren't they amazing?
Oh God, that's beautiful.
We've been very blessed, and we have a volunteer who works with Go Native Nursery, and they've been very, very generous in their time and their information and their knowledge. And they also have a greenhouse that we've been able to propagate plants at. So we'll plant flats, and they'll germinate in the greenhouse. We tried a project in November of 2010, where we actually had volunteers come and we planted plants, take the flat home, grow it. It's a native plant, just put it outside, it'll grow. And it didn't grow because we had a very, very wet, very, very cold winter. And so a lot of people didn't have success doing that. So we realized it would be better if we could germinate them in a greenhouse. And then, if necessary, send them home for stewardship and let people learn about it. The one thing that happened with that little experiment that we did was that a lot of people learned and were like, oh my God, okay, so maybe they learned 1 plant or 2 plants or 3 plants. They may have done that. And now they have an interest and they understand a little bit more about native versus non-native. And so these people have had an experience now when they go out to look at gardens, they can say, oh, I know a little bit about this. And hopefully our mission is really to educate so that they can bring it back to their own environment. And we have people working at the beach, we have people working at the headlands, we have people doing little guerrilla stuff in different places in their own backyards. So It's been pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Mike, yes, the controversy of the non-natives. We're not against all of the non-natives.
No. Well, I mean, non-native simply means that they're not from say this place in California where we're located right now, and there are many species that occur in gardens that are from various parts of the world that simply don't really cause any problems. And there are many species that have been in here and have naturalized in California over the last couple hundred years that are so much a part of our grasslands now that there's just no way you're going to really get rid of them. So they've integrated themselves into our natural communities. There are a relatively small number of species that really, once they get established in a native habitat, are able to become real problems because they take up the space that were the native species. So as Lynn was saying, they basically will overwhelm a grassland community and create an artificial shrubland. One of our native species in terms of California, the Monterey pine, was not here when the Spanish arrived here, which is one of the definitions of is it native or not native, or indigenous or not indigenous. And yet the Monterey pine really is spreading rapidly throughout our hills, and it's converting shrublands and grasslands into forest. And there's a lot of species that get lost in that transition. Now, it's very complicated because those pines do provide habitat value for migratory bird species, for example. But they knock out the habitat that the resident bird species depend upon, and many reptiles and so on, and insects. So we're really respecting the value of those pines and those pine stands out, for example, at Pedro Point Headland, and allowing them to persist. We're not trying to remove the stands or the groves, and we're allowing them to recruit underneath, but we're trying to prevent those pines from spreading out into the shrublands and taking over habitat.
Well, now, what would you have to say to those people that are still ambivalent about propagating native plants?
Well, I would say in general, so one of the things that we've done up there on the headland is that we have gone up and collected site-specific natives. And so you have to have a source, and we have a great source at Pedro Point Headland. So we've got a lot of material and growing up plants. You can use those plants in a variety of ways. We use them for restoration purposes, but they're also fabulous in your garden. They require much less water than the average plant from anywhere else, for the most part. They're beautiful. The native fauna, bees, butterflies, birds, a variety, ants. I mean, the native fauna depend on these species. So like in my garden at home, for example, I have a number of native plants that are planted in my garden, and they attract many different species that I see them out there, and you really don't have to spend a lot of time trying to care for them, and I think they're beautiful too, by the way. So anyway.
And I've heard that they provide habitat for 400% more insects than a non-native species, in addition to not using the gas, the water, or the attention and the time to take care of it. So it's a real beneficial thing to go native.
So, we have one more interview from a volunteer. Let's hear what he has to say to those people that want to volunteer.
I hike here all the time. I'm from Pacifica, and my hobby, I enjoy bird watching, looking for wildlife, and a lot of the work we do helps maintain wildlife populations that are dwindling. So I feel like I'm giving back to an area that I really get a lot out of and get you out, meet with others. So good, positive thing.
Well, now you know that there is volunteers that are needed. What are the websites that they can go to?
They can go to www.pedropointheadlands.org, or they can go to pacifica-land-trust.org and get information about our work.
And when is your next day going up there?
We'll go up with the California Coastal Cleanup Day on September 15th, Saturday at 9 a.m. We meet at the firehouse at 8:45. We load up our tools, get our collections together, and we carpool up to the site. And then our following one is the last Sunday of October, which is October 28th. And we meet up at the firehouse at at 9:45.
I want to thank my guests today, Mike Vassie and Lynn Adams. Thank you for coming and educating us more on how to preserve our beautiful Pacifica area here. And befriend us on Facebook. Send us those questions. We need them for our experts. Happy gardening, everybody.
Thank you, Margaret.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you, Margarita.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.